Thus while he spoke, already she began with sparkling eyes to view the guilty man. From head to foot surveyed his person o'er, nor longer these outrageous threats forbore. False as thou art, and more than false, forsworn, not sprung from noble blood, nor goddess born, but hewn from hardened entrails of a rock, and rough Hyrcanian tigers gave thee suck. Why should I fawn? What have I worse to fear? Did he once look, or lent a listening ear, sighed when I sobbed, or shed one kindly tear? All symptoms of a base, ungrateful mind, so foul that which is worst 'tis hard to find. Of man's injustice why should I complain? The gods and Jove himself behold in vain triumphant treason. Yet no thunder flies, nor Juno views my wrongs with equal eyes. Faithless is earth, and faithless are the skies. Justice is fled, and truth is now no more. I saved the shipwrecked exile on my shore. With needful food his hungry Trojans fed. I took the traitor to my throne and bed. Fool that I was, it is little to repeat the rest. I stored and rigged his ruined fleet. I rave, I rave! A god's command he pleads, and makes heaven accessory to his deeds. Now Lycian lots, and now the Delian god. Now Hermes is employed from Jove's abode to warn him hence, as if the peaceful state of heavenly powers were touched with human fate. But go! Thy flight no longer I detain. Go seek thy promised kingdom through the main. Yet if the heavens will hear my pious vow, the faithless waves, not half so false as thou, or secret sands, shall sepulchres afford to thy proud vessels and their perjured lord. Then shalt thou call on injured Dido's name. Dido shall come in a black sulphury flame, when death has once dissolved her mortal frame. Shall smile to see the traitor vainly weep. Her angry ghost arising from the deep shall haunt thee waking and disturb thy sleep. At least my shade thy punishment shall know, and fame shall spread the pleasing news below. Abruptly here she stops, then turns away her loathing eyes and shuns the sight of day. Amazed he stood, revolving in his mind what speech to frame and what excuse to find. Her fearful maids their fainting mistress led, and softly laid her on her ivory bed. But good Aeneas, though he much desired to give that pity which her grief required, though much he mourned and laboured with his love, resolved at length, obeys the will of Jove. Reviews his forces, they with early care unmoor their vessels, and for sea prepare. The fleet is soon afloat in all its pride, and well-cocked galleys in the harbour ride. Then oaks for oars they felled, or as they stood of its green arms despoiled the growing wood, studious of flight. The beach is covered o'er with Trojan bands that blacken all the shore. On every side are seen, descending down, thick swarms of soldiers, loaden from the town. Thus in battalia march embodied ants, fearful of winter and of future wants to invade the corn, and to their cells convey the plundered forage of their yellow prey. The sable troops along the narrow tracks scarce bear the weighty burthen on their backs. Some set their shoulders to the ponderous grain, some guard the spoil, some lash the lagging train. All ply their several tasks, and equal toil sustain. What pangs the tender breast of Dido tore, when from the tower she saw the covered shore, and heard the shouts of sailors from afar, mixed with the murmurs of the watery war. All-powerful love, what changes canst thou cause in human hearts, subjected to thy laws? Once more her haughty soul the tyrant bends, to prayers and mean submissions she descends. No female arts or aids she left untried, nor counsels unexplored before she died. Okay, ominous ending to this section. But let's start at the beginning. So she has heard Aeneas say, the gods are calling me away, and so on and so forth. And she starts that Aeneas is false. Worse than false, he is a liar under oath, forsworn. And he certainly couldn't be noble, he certainly couldn't be goddess-born. He was hewn from rocks, from mountains. That's what his heart, what his guts are made of. He is made entirely of stone to be treating her this way. Rough Hyrcanian tigers is what he must have nursed on. Hyrcanian would be like Iranian. So she's not happy with him whatsoever. And She's having trouble. It's hard to say here exactly how she's feeling, but how do you think she's feeling? And we get a hint, obviously, in the tone of her word choice, but at the very end, 565, he's standing amazed at her torrent of words, however we're saying she's feeling. But look, her fearful maids their fainting mistress led, and softly laid her on her ivory bed. Okay, so she is fainting. Fainting so badly, apparently, that her maids are laying her gently on her bed. So I think that gives us a hint of how she's feeling. So she calls herself a fool. She's saying, it's wrong of you to blame the gods for this, but go. And I hope you die at sea. It gets really intense. The faithless waves or secret sands shall afford sepulchres, graves to your proud vessels. So you're going to crash, you're going to shipwreck, or you're going to drown. And my ghost is all that's going to be left, but my ghost is going to be happy to see that justice has been served, you monstrous man. So that's kind of what she's saying here. But good Aeneas, 569, he desired to give her pity and mourn, and his heart is beating in his chest because he loves Dido, but he resolves at length to just do what Jove says to do. So it doesn't seem like he's going to give any more effort to helping Dido cope here. So he goes to his men, and they get the ships ready. And then we have this kind of extended simile. Thus in Battalia 583, they're all like ants, right? Ants that are going into the field to get corn, and they're bringing the corn back into their storehouses for winter. That's exactly what the soldiers are doing. And Dido sees this. She sees them all working, and she is absolutely crushed by it. And Virgil again gives this little aside. All-powerful love, Venus, what changes canst thou cause in human hearts subjected to thy laws? You can change human hearts so greatly because they are under your control. So Dido sees this, and there's nothing in the female arts that she doesn't try as a result. So let's see what that means. 602. Look, Anna, look! The Trojans crowd to sea. They spread their canvas and their anchors weigh. The shouting crew their ships with garlands bind, invoke the sea gods and invite the wind. Could I have thought this threatening blow so near, my tender soul had been forewarned to bear. But do not you my last request deny. With yon perfidious man your interest try, and bring me news, if I must live or die. You are his favourite. You alone can find the dark recesses of his inmost mind. In all his trusted secrets you have part, and know the soft approaches to his heart. Haste then, and humbly seek my haughty foe. Tell him I did not with the Grecians go, nor did my fleet against his friends employ, nor swore the ruin of unhappy Troy, nor moved with hands profane his father's dust. Why should he then reject a just? Whom does he shun, and whither would he fly? Can he this last, this only prayer deny? Let him at least his dangerous flight delay, wait better winds, and hope a calmer sea. The nuptials he disclaims, I urge no more. Let him pursue the promised Latian shore. A short delay is all I ask him now. A pause of grief, an interval from woe, till my soft soul be tempered to sustain accustomed sorrows and inured to pain. If you in pity grant this one request, my death shall glut the hatred of his breast. This mournful message pious Anna bears, and seconds with her own her sister's tears. But all her arts are still employed in vain. Again she comes, and is refused again. His hardened heart nor prayers nor threatenings move. Fate and the god had stopped his ears to love. As when the winds their airy quarrel try, justling from every quarter of the sky, this way and that the mountain oak they bend, his boughs they shatter and his branches rend, with leaves and falling mass they spread the ground, the hollow valleys echo to the sound. Unmoved, the royal plant their fury mocks, or shaken, clings more closely to the rocks. Far as he shoots his towering head on high, so deep in earth his fixed foundations lie. No less a storm the Trojan hero bears. Thick messages and loud complaints he hears, and bandied words still beating on his ears. Sighs, groans, and tears proclaim his inward pains, but the firm purpose of his heart remains. Alrighty. Look, Anna! Look, the Trojans crowd to see! That's how we start this section, and Dido seems to be moving away from her fierce wrath. She's calming down a little bit. She still calls him a perfidious and untrustworthy, treacherous man in 609 there, but she wants Anna to go to Aeneas because Aeneas really likes Anna. Aeneas really gets along with her and says, maybe you can convince him. I'll give up all the love stuff, right? 625. The nuptials he disclaims, I urge no more. All the love stuff we've been doing, I won't make a big deal out of it, but just please, just tell him to stay a little bit longer. Don't let him leave yet. Just so I can accept that he won't come. And we get this interesting note. Anna goes, she's crying, Dido's crying, but he refuses to listen. His heart is hardened, and nothing can move it. Because, 638, fate and the god, Jove, had stopped his ears to love. So nothing's convincing him, because fate and Jove won't let anything convince him. And then we get this simile, starting in 639. It's like when the mountain winds beat on an oak tree, and they're beating on it, but the oak tree is unmoved. 645. If it's shaken at all it does is hug the mountain a little more and then proudly stand up tall. And this is exactly what Aeneas is doing. This storm of words that's coming from Anna. Yeah, on the inside he's sad, right? When he's alone, maybe, 652, he does sigh, he groans, he maybe even cries. But he doesn't change his mind. He's still firm in his purpose. He's firm in his heart. So, we'll see how Dido responds. 654. The wretched queen, pursued by cruel fates, begins at length the light of heaven to hate, and loathes to live. Then dire portents she sees to hasten on the death her soul decrees. Strange to relate, for when before the shrine she pours in sacrifice the purple wine is turned to putrid blood, and the white offered milk converts to mud. This dire presage to her alone revealed, from all and even her sister she concealed. A marble temple stood within the grove, sacred to death and to her murdered love. That honored chapel she had hung around with snowy fleeces and with garlands crowned. Oft when she visited this lonely dome, strange voices issued from her husband's tomb. She thought she heard him summon her away, invite her to his grave, and chide her stay. Hourly it is heard, when with a boding note the solitary screech owl strains her throat, and on a chimney's top or turret's height with songs obscene disturbs the silence of the night. Besides, old prophecies augment her fears, and stern Aeneas in her dreams appears. Disdainful as by day, she seems alone to wander in her sleep, through ways unknown, guideless and dark, or in a desert plain, to seek her subjects and to seek in vain. Like Pentheus, when distracted with his fear, he saw two sons in double Thebes appear, or mad Orestes, when his mother's ghost full in his faith infernal torches tossed, and shook her snaky locks. He shuns the sight, flies o'er the stage, surprised with mortal fright. The Furies guard the door and intercept his flight. Now, sinking underneath a load of grief, from death alone she seeks her last relief. The time and means resolved within her breast, she to her mournful sister thus addressed. Dissembling hope, her cloudy front she clears, and a false vigor in her eyes appears. "Rejoice," she said, "instructed from above, my lover I shall gain or lose my love. Nigh rising Atlas, next the falling sun, long tracts of Ethiopian climates run. There a Massilian priestess I have found, honored for age, for magic arts renowned. The Hesperian temple was her trusted care. It was she supplied the wakeful dragon's fare. She poppy seeds and honey taught to steep, reclaimed his rage and soothed him into sleep. She watched the golden fruit. Her charms unbind the chains of love, or fix them on the mind. She stops the torrents, leaves the channel dry, repels the stars, and backward bears the sky. The yawning earth rebellows to her call. Pale ghosts ascend, and mountain ashes fall. Witness, ye gods, and thou my better part, how loth I am to try this impious art. Within the secret court with silent care erect a lofty pile, exposed in air. Hang on the topmost part the Trojan vest, spoils, arms, and presents of my faithless guest. Next under these the bridal bed he placed, where I my ruin in his arms embraced. All relics of the wretch are doomed to fire, for so the priestess and her charms require. Thus far she said, and farther speech forbears. A mortal paleness in her face appears. Yet the mistrustless Anna could not find the secret funeral in these rites designed, nor thought so dire a rage possessed her mind. Unknowing of a train concealed so well, she feared no worse than when Zacchaeus fell. Therefore obeys. The fatal pile they rear, within the secret court exposed in air. The cloven holms and pines are heaped on high, and garlands on the hollow spaces lie. Sad cypress for vain yew compose the wreath, and every baleful green denoting death. The queen determined to the fatal deed, the spoils and sword he left in others spread, and the man's image on the nuptial bed. And now, the sacred altars placed around, the priestess enters, with her hair unbound, and thrice invokes the powers below the ground. Okay, the wretched queen, 654, is pursued by cruel fate, and she starts hating every day. Every time she sees the light, she hates what she sees. And so, it's strange to relate, but she knew her death was coming because when she poured out this wine to the gods, it turned to blood. When she poured out this milk, it turned to mud. And so she knew she was going to die because of this, but she didn't tell anybody about it. And sometimes when she would go to her husband's grave, which she kind of made into the shrine for him, she would hear her husband's voice beckoning her to himself. And so creepy, right? The screech owl is singing songs that are kind of ominous, and all of these things are convincing her that it's time to die. She's like Pentheus and Orestes, both are mythical figures who were completely plagued by the Furies, and so is she. And so she's convinced death is her only way out, and I'll take a second to say, death is never the only way out, and there's always hope, and hope is found in Christ Jesus. So she, of course, doesn't have that hope, and she doesn't see any other way out. And so she decides how she's going to do it, and she tries to put on a good face for Anna so that Anna will kind of go along with the plan. So she pretends to be happy. Rejoice! Hey, I found the solution to my problem. And it's either going to make Aeneas come back, my lover gain, or I'm not going to be in love with him anymore. And here's what it's going to be. There's this Massilian, again, a Berber kind of what they would think of as barbarians, a priestess. And she used to take care of the temple and the tree of Hera. I guess in this case, this would be Juno, Juno's golden tree. And there's some mythological tales about that. But there's the dragon there, and she kind of relates all of the parts of the myth. But she has the ability to make all these things go backwards, make time go backwards, make the mountain ashes fall, the trees from the mountains fall down, pale ghosts come back to life, all these things to do in reverse. And so even though I'm loath to do it, I really don't want to do this impious thing, I'm going to try it, and I think it'll work. So we're going to pile all of Aeneas's things on a pyre, and we're going to light it all up. And once it's all burned, this is what she said I have to do in order to either get him to come back or that I'm not in love with him anymore. And so Anna doesn't suspect anything. She thinks, well, this is going to be as bad at the very worst as when Zacchaeus died. And, Dido was all broken up about this Dido was all broken up when her first husband died, and so this will be the end of this. And so they pile all these trees on there, and at the very top, they put this kind of effigy, this crude figure of a hated person, an effigy, on the nuptial bed as well. And then the priestess enters, and she has her hair all loosed, and she's going to do her creepy art. So that's what we'll start in 740. Night, Erebus, and chaos she proclaims, and threefold Hecate with her 100 names, and 3 Dianas. Next she sprinkles round with faint Avernian drops the hallowed ground. Coals hoary simples found by Phoebe's light with brazen sickles reaped at noon of nights, then mixes baleful juices in the bowl and cuts the forehead of a newborn foal, robbing the mother's love. The destined queen observes, assisting at the rites obscene, a leavened cake in her devoted hand she holds, and next the highest altar stands. One tender foot was shod, her other bare, girt was her gathered gown and loose her hair. Thus dressed, she summoned with her dying breath the heavens and planets conscious of her death, and every power, if any, rules above, who minds or who revenges injured love. It was dead of night when weary bodies closed their eyes in balmy sleep and soft repose. The winds no longer whisper through the woods, nor murmuring tides disturb the gentle floods. The stars in silent order moved around, and peace with downy wings was brooding on the ground the flocks and herds, and party-colored fowl, which haunt the woods or swim the weedy pool, stretched on the quiet earth securely lay, forgetting the past labors of the day. All else of nature's common gift partake. Unhappy Dido was alone awake. Nor sleep nor ease the furious queen can find. Sleep fled her eyes, as quiet fled her mind. Despair and rage and love divide her heart. Despair and rage had some, but love the greater part. Then thus she said within her secret mind, What shall I do? What succor can I find? Become a suppliant to Hyarbus' pride, and take my turn to court and be denied? Shall I with this ungrateful Trojan go, forsake an empire and attend a foe? Himself I refuged, and his train relieved, it is true, but am I sure to be received? Can gratitude in Trojan souls have place? Laomedon still lives in all his race. Then shall I seek alone the churlish crew, or with my fleet their flying sails pursue? What force have I but those whom scarce before I drew reluctant from their native shore? Will they again embark at my desire, once more sustain the seas and quit their second Tyre? Rather with steel thy guilty breast invade, and take the fortune thou thyself hast made. Your pity, sister, first seduced my mind, or seconded too well what I designed. These dear-bought pleasures had I never known, had I continued free and still my own. Avoiding love, I had not found despair, but shared with savage beasts the common air. Like them a lonely life I might have led, not mourn the living nor disturb the dead. These thoughts she brooded in her anxious breast. On board the Trojan found more easy rest. Resolved to sail and sleep he passed the night, and ordered all things for his early flight. To whom once more the winged god appears, his former youthful mien and shape he wears, and with this new alarm invades his ears. Sleep'st thou, O goddess born? And canst thou drown thy needful cares so near a hostile town, beset with foes? Nor hear'st the western gales invite thy passage and inspire thy sails? She harbors in her heart a furious hate, and thou shalt find the dire effects too late, fixed on revenge and obstinate to die. Haste swiftly hence, while thou hast power to fly. The sea with ships will soon be covered o'er, and blazing firebrands kindle all the shore. Prevent her rage, while night obscures the skies, and sail before the purple morn arise. Who knows what hazards thy delay may bring? Woman's a various and a changeful thing. Thus Hermes in the dream, then took his flight aloft into air unseen and mixed with night. Twice warned by the celestial messenger, the pious prince arose with hasty fear, then roused his drowsy train without delay. Haste to your banks, your crooked anchors weigh, and spread your flying sails, and stand to sea. A god commands. He stood before my sight, and urged us once again to speedy flight. O sacred power, what power soe'er thou art, to thy blessed orders I resign my heart. Lead thou the way, protect thy Trojan bands, and prosper the design thy will commands. He said, And drawing forth his flaming sword, his thundering arm divides the many-twisted cord, and emulating zeal inspires his train. They run, they snatch, they rush into the main. With headlong haste they leave the desert shores, and brush the liquid seas with laboring oars. So again, we go back and forth between Dido and Aeneas. Dido starts the scene, and she has essentially this witch, right? Hecate would be the goddess of the underworld, night, and witchcraft. And so she is invoking the name of all of this bad stuff. This witch is this priestess, they call. And so-called Avernian drops from the underworlds. And then she culls hoary simples, which means she chooses ancient plants that's found by Phoebe's night, by the moonlight in the middle of the night. They were reaped in a special way, and so it's very much this potion witchcrafty kind of thing. And 748, the destined queen Dido observes, and she even participates in the rites to try to really stick it to Aeneas, right? And then she tries to decide what to do exactly. Unhappy Dido, 769, cannot sleep. She's up in the middle of the night, and her heart is full of three things: despair, rage, and love. And again, Virgil tells us, despair and rage were some of her heart, but it was really mostly still full of love. And it seems like that's kind of him saying, that's the source of heartache. That's why heartbreak hurts so much. And then she's trying to decide what her options really are. Should she go with Hyarba, this Libyan suitor? What, go and be denied? She knows that he hates her. Should she go with this ungrateful Trojan, line 778? What, and forsake Carthage? Leave it all behind? And yeah, I was nice to him, but you know what? Trojans aren't any better than their ancestors. Laomedon was one who completely stabbed the gods in the back, and Hercules himself in the back. And there's a story behind that, but we won't get into it. So all the Trojans are the exact same way. They're just backstabbers. Should I try to go and pursue the Trojans and take them out in war? With what force? I don't have anyone who's going to follow me. The Tyrians who followed me here barely followed me here. And again, whether that's exactly true, it's kind of unclear. She hasn't been sleeping much, right? So maybe she's not thinking things through clearly. That's probable, right? If you're in a situation like this and you're losing all hope, you need to make sure you're taking care of your body, going outside. You need to eat good food. You need to talk to others and trust them and trust what God says in His Word, not just listen to your tired brain that's heartbroken, right? But yeah, no one's going to follow me if I go after the Trojans. You know, I don't have any other choice. And she settles on it. She's going to invade her guilty breast with steel, meaning she's going to end her life with a knife or a sword. I wish I had never met him. My dear sister seduced my mind with pity, and maybe, honestly, maybe it was my idea before it was hers, and she just encouraged me in it, but I wish I had never done any of this. I wish I had been free of all this love and just shared the common air with savage beasts, but it's too late. Meanwhile, Aeneas is sleeping soundly. Interesting, right? So Virgil really sets up this interesting dynamic, but so Aeneas is just slumbering away, completely at peace. So Mercury shows up and says, Aeneas, why are you still here? This is a dangerous place to be peacefully slumbering. It's time to leave. The winds are perfect. The weather's perfect. It's time to go now. There's no telling what will happen if you put this off till tomorrow. So Aeneas wakes up. The pious prince, 824, obeys the god without delay. And he wakes all of his men up. A god just appeared to me. He said it was time to go, so it's time to go. So 834, he draws his sword, and then he cuts the cord that is anchoring them to port, and the rest of the fleet follows suit, and they are off to sea. Aurora now had left her saffron bed, and beams of early light the heavens o'erspread, when from a tower the queen with wakeful eyes saw day point upward from the rosy skies. She looked to seaward, but the sea was void, and scarce and ken the sailing ships descried. Stung with despite, and furious with despair, she struck her trembling breast and tore her hair. "And shall the ungrateful traitor go?" she said. "My land forsaken and my love betrayed, shall we not arm, not rush from every street to follow, sink, and burn his perjured fleet? Haste, haul my galleys out, pursue the foe, bring flaming brands, set sail and swiftly row." What have I said? Where am I? Fury turns my brain and my distempered bosom burns. Then when I gave my person and my throne, this hate, this rage had been more timely shown. See now the promised faith, the vaunted name, the pious man who rushing through the flame preserved his gods, and to the Phrygian shore the burthen of his feeble father bore. I should have torn him piecemeal, strode in floods his scattered limbs, or left exposed in woods, destroyed his friends and son, and from the fire have set the reeking boy before the sire. Events are doubtful which on battles wait, yet where's the doubt to souls secure of fate? My Tyrians at their injured queen's command had tossed their fires amid the Trojan band, at once extinguished all the faithless name, and I myself in vengeance of my shame had fallen upon the pile to mend the funeral flame. Thou sun, who view'st at once the world below, thou Juno, guardian of the nuptial vow, thou Hecate, hearken from thy dark abodes. Ye Furies, fiends, and violated gods, all powers invoked with Dido's dying breath, attend her curses and avenge her death. If so the fates ordain, Jove commands, the ungrateful wretch should find the Latian lands, yet let a race untamed and haughty foes his peaceful entrance with dire arms oppose. Oppressed with numbers in the unequal field, his men discouraged and himself expelled, let him for succor sue from place to place, torn from his subjects and his son's embrace. First let him see his friends in battle slain, and their untimely fate lament in vain. And when at length the cruel war shall cease, on hard conditions may he buy his peace. Nor let him then enjoy supreme command, but fall untimely by some hostile hand, and lie unburied on the barren sand. These are my prayers, and this my dying will, and you, my Tyrians, every curse fulfill. Perpetual hate and mortal wars proclaim against the prince, the people, and the name. These grateful offerings on my grave bestow, nor league nor love the hostile nations know. Now and from hence in every future age, when rage excites your arms and strength supplies the rage, rise some avenger of our Libyan blood, with fire and sword pursue the perjured brood. Our arms, our seas, our shores opposed to theirs, and the same hate descend on all our heirs. Okie dokie. Dido is not happy. So Dido wakes up in the morning, and from her tower she looks toward the sea, but the sea is empty. And scarce in her ken, in her sight, the sailing ship she descried, she just barely made them out. And so, stung with spite and furious, she tears her hair and she goes on an utter rampage verbally against Aeneas and calls every curse she can think of on him. So we'll just go through a few of the things here. So this noble man, I should have torn him, line 862, to pieces. And it's really gruesome. I should have scattered his limbs into the river, thrown him into the woods, should have killed all of his friends. I should have killed his son, cooked his son up, and served him to Aeneas. I mean, yikes, right? That's definitely hearkening back to the play of Agamemnon, that story, right? And so, with every god she can think of, she calls down hardship and death on the Trojans. I pray he dies, and I guess I know that Jove and the fates ordain that he's going to get to Latian lands. He's going to go and found Rome. So when he gets there, I hope it is absolutely miserable establishing a kingdom. I hope that he is ripped away from all of his men and his son. I hope cruel war never ceases against them. He never finds peace. That as soon as he finally gets supreme command, line 891, that he'll die. He'll be killed by some enemy. And then 895, she exhorts her future Carthaginians to fulfill her curses, to never give the descendants of Aeneas peace. And so, of course, historically speaking, Carthage fulfills this request of this fictionalized Dido. Yikes. So, a lot of venom coming from Dido in this section. Continuing line 906. Thus said, within her anxious mind she weighs the means of cutting short her odious days. Then to Sichaeus' nurse she briefly said, for when she left her country hers was dead, go, Barca, call my sister. Let her care the solemn rites of sacrifice prepare. The sheep and all the atoning offerings bring, sprinkling her body from the crystal spring with living drops. Then let her come, and thou with sacred fillets bind thy hoary brow. Thus will I pay my vows to Stygian Jove, and end the cares of my disastrous love. Stygian Jove here would be like the ruler of Stygian, Styx, the underworld. So that would be Hades. Then cast the Trojan image on the fire, and as that burns, my passion shall expire. The nurse moves onward with officious care, and all the speed her aged limbs can bear. But furious Dido, with dark thoughts involved, shook at the mighty mischief she resolved. With livid spots distinguished was her face, red were her rolling eyes, and discomposed her pace. Ghastly she gazed, with pain she drew her breath, and nature shivered at approaching death. Then swiftly to the fatal place she passed, and mounts the funeral pyre with furious haste. Unsheathes the sword the Trojan left behind, not for so dire an enterprise designed. But when she viewed the garments loosely spread, which once he wore, and saw the conscious bed, she paused, and with a sigh the robes embraced. Then on the couch her trembling body cast, repressed the ready tears, and spoke her last. Dear pledges of my love, while heaven so pleased, receive a soul of mortal anguish eased. My fatal course is finished, and I go, a glorious name, among the ghosts below. A lofty city by my hands is raised, Pygmalion punished, and my lord appeased. What could my fortune have afforded more, had the false Trojan never touched my shore? Then kissed the couch, and, must I die, she said, and unrevenged? It is doubly to be dead. Yet even this death with pleasure I receive. On any terms it is better than to live. These flames from far may the false Trojan view. These boding omens his base flight pursue. She said, and struck. Deep entered in her side the piercing steel, with reeking purple dyed. Clogged in the wound the cruel weapon stands. The spouting blood came streaming on her hands. Her sad attendants saw the deadly stroke, and with loud cries the sounding palace shook. Distracted from the fatal sight they fled, and through the town the dismal rumor spread. First from the frighted court the yell began, redoubled thence from house to house it ran. The groans of men, with shrieks, laments, and cries of mixing women, mount the vaulted skies. Not less the clamor than if ancient Tyre or the new Carthage set by foes on fire. The rolling ruin with their loved abodes involve the blazing temples of their gods. Her sister hears, and furious with despair she beats her breast and rends her yellow hair, and calling on Eliza's name aloud, runs breathless to the place and breaks the crowd. Was all that pomp of woe for this prepared? These fires, this funeral pile, these altars reared? Was all this train of plots contrived, said she, all only to deceive unhappy me? What is the worst? Didst thou in death pretend to scorn thy sister, or delude thy friend? Thy summoned sister and thy friend have come. One sword has served us both, one common tomb. Was I to raise the pile the powers invoke, not to be present at the fatal stroke. At once thou hast destroyed thyself and me, thy town, thy senate, and thy colony. Bring water, bathe the wound, while I in death lay close my lips to hers, and catch the flying breath. This said, she mounts the pile with eager haste, and in her arms the grasping queen embraced. Her temples chafed, and her own garments tore to staunch the streaming blood and cleanse the gore. Thrice Dido tried to raise her drooping head, and fainting thrice fell grovelling on the bed. Thrice oped her heavy eyes and sought the light, but having found it sickened at the sight, and closed her lids at last in endless night. Then Juno, grieving that she should sustain a death so lingering and so full of pain, sent Iris down to free her from the strife of laboring nature and dissolve her life. For since she died, not doomed by heaven's decree or her own crime, but human casualty and rage of love that plunged her in despair, the sisters had not cut her topmost hair, which Proserpina and they can only know, nor made her sacred to the shades below. Downward the various goddess took her flight, and drew 1,000 colors from the light. Then stood above the dying lover's head, and said, I thus devote thee to the dead, this offering to the infernal gods I bear. Thus while she spoke, she cut the fatal hair. The struggling soul was loosed, and life dissolved in air. Okay, we have the story of Dido's death. So she tells Barke, her nurse, who used to be her husband's, to go get her sister. And so her nurse leaves her, and her sister's on her way. And she is in anguish. She's drawing her breath with pain. It just hurts to live. And again, she doesn't think there's any hope, right? And there's always hope when we are Christians, especially. So she climbs onto the funeral pyre, intent on stabbing herself and being rid of this life. And when she gets to the top, she sees Aeneas's old clothes, and she takes a moment to remember the time that they had together. And it gives her anguish. She says her last words, and she does the task. She takes out the steel, the knife, and she stabs herself on the side. And so we get this account of the horror that this act is met with from all of Carthage, and especially her sister. Her sister who says, Dido, in killing yourself, you're killing us both. And she is in agony as well. She's trying to comfort her sister, be with her sister in her last moments, and Dido can't even lift her head anymore. She's barely breathing. She's dying this slow, agonizing death, and every time she tries to lift her head, it falls back down, and she opens her eyes 3 times, but when she sees the light, it sickens her to see the light, and so she prefers darkness. And Juno, looking down and seeing how much pain the dying Dido is in, sends down Iris to cut the hair of Dido's life. And so this kind of relates to the 3 fates, right? But there's this interesting part where Virgil tells us, 998, she died not by heaven's decree. It wasn't her own crime that killed her, but it was the rage of love by human casualty that plunged her into despair. So Dido is dying before her destined time by this act. So there's something to unpack there, certainly, but the sisters, the Fates, have not cut the topmost hair to finish her life, and so Juno kind of overrides that in this circumstance and sends Iris down to do the task. And Iris devotes her to the dead, and we get this last really harrowing line. The struggling soul was loose, and life dissolved in air. And Dido is dead. and Aeneas is at sea. And that is the note with which Virgil ends Book 4.